Hey everybody, before the others materialize into the room, I just want to let everyone know that this podcast and the two to follow have huge spoilers for Umineko When They Cry. So if you haven't read the series yet, I'd highly recommend reading first before continuing with these videos. But wait, person I've never met before and whose name will probably be mentioned in the video, where do I get Umineko When They Cry? You can actually find all 8 chapters easily on Steam right now. So check it out and come back when you're done. Okay? Perfect. And with that, I think I sense them materializing into the room, so enjoy the podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a little sit-down discussion here between a few of the Let's Players that have been running through Umineko recently. Sitting around the table, we have myself, Dracono, joined by One Crazy Fox 1.
Yo.
Got Sabata92.
How's it going?
And Nuke3012.
Great to be here.
So, we've all recently just finished Umineko and Onaka Koroni, rounding out all 8 episodes, and those will be appearing on our channels. Should all be live except for mine, I think, by the time this goes out. But we wanted to sit down and talk about this story, because I think anyone that's read through it knows that it's quite the astounding piece of literature once you get to the end of it.
Oh, definitely.
That is the biggest understatement I've ever heard.
Yeah.
My God.
It's absolutely wild. Like, you get into this, and I think a lot of people, especially watching the beginning of my playthrough, saw me just talking shit about it and being like, what is this Japanese piece of nonsense?
I did too. Chapter 1, I was like, this is fucking boring as shit, and then stuff happened, and then I literally could not put it down until the end of the series.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic how it manages to come around and hook you. There definitely is a bit of a slow, shaky, tropey start, but once you get past that, it is just a brilliant piece of work, and I'm so glad that I soldiered through it, and I'm sure you guys are as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I actually had people like messaging me way back when it came out, because I was actually one of the first people to do Higurashi, so a lot of people knew me back then. Problem is that I have this policy of I wait until everything's finished, and Umineko, as I'm going to be calling it, because Umineko is something weird. Umineko was like not fully translated when people asked me, so this has been a long time coming from my end.
Yeah, so you'd kind of heard about it through Higurashi, and then people kind of poked you at it. What about you, Sabata? How did you first hear about the series?
Well, I heard about Umineko around the time that kind of whenever I started Higurashi. And I think Higurashi was actually more my first taste into visual novels, just,
Right, yeah, same for me.
Yeah. I was not really used to the format of the story itself, but after I started getting into Higurashi, I started opening up a little bit, and I'm like, okay, these are actually well-written stories. And then somebody told me about Umineko, or rather, Umineko, as you pronounce it.
And then someone pulled you into a back alley, and it's like, you want to try this new drug?
Exactly.
It's pretty much what... Going from Higurashi, Umineko is pretty much acid. Just a trip the whole time.
Oh, it's insane.
Literally an understatement right there.
Yeah, was it any different for you? Did you?
I started with Higurashi. That was my first series to go up, so once I ended up getting to about chapter 6 or so, that's when people started saying, hey, you probably want to do Umineko sometime.
Yeah, I think, so that means I'm the only person that actually started with Umineko. My friend Magus Vorum, who's part of my playthrough, basically went on about it for several months as he was reading it through for the first time himself. And then I got sick of hearing about it, and I was like, fuck it, let's just read through it together and record us being stupid at the same time.
I mean, whatever gets you into it, I guess.
So, yeah.
And the magic was born.
I mean, yeah, the thing is, to me, I think visual novels, at least as I perceive them, tend to be like the worst parts of video games and the worst parts of books thrown together. But I think Umineko and Higurashi make a really good case for how you can still use that medium really effectively.
Right, because when you think of visual novels, you think of the dating ones. Disability Girls comes to mind. I don't remember the Japanese name. But things like that come to mind, where there's a lot of sex going on in the background. There's a lot of romance, and Umineko did touch on that a little bit. Not the sex part, but the romance part. But I feel like '07 knows what he's doing. Like he knows the art of storytelling more than just what most visual novel authors do, in that they write something and then that's it.
Yeah.
You mean like freaking Neko Para?
Oh my god.
Even if you just look at the publishing list for Manga Gamer, who just did the Steam release for Higurashi and Umineko, you can see that like most of the products they put out are like dating sim and erotic games or whatever, because that's just what their market is.
Yeah.
But it's good that things do still come through that actually are able to tell an interesting story.
It surprised me going back to Manga Gamers to buy the original copies of Umineko when I did. Thank God, because now they're gone. It was surprising going back, because when I first got Higurashi, they're a very respectable looking site. There was a couple, iffy ones there. When I went back, they had so much breasts everywhere. It looked like I found into a. It looked like I went onto a porn site. Like, I'll be honest. So I'm glad that Manga Gamers is still like proud about a couple of things, but please fix your website. Yeah.
I was able to sit down a few weeks ago with one of the, in fact, the head translator for The Witch Hunt, who did the original and the recent Steam Umineko translation, and he made the excellent observation that, like, to keep a story going for this long, we're past the 10th anniversary of the original release of Umineko, and the community is still strong. There's still people reading through it. There's still new theory crafting. There's still new theories coming out as well, which is absolutely bonkers. Yeah. And it speaks really strongly for the actual quality of the story and the storytelling.
Speaking of anniversaries, last year, because we're recording this on 2018 if you're watching in the future, last year was Higurashi's 15th anniversary. I don't know when Umineko Legend of the Golden Witch came out.
I believe 2007.
We should probably get towards the actual chapters. I mean, we could go on for like an hour on Umineko.
And we probably will. But yeah, let's run through them. So I don't want to sit and discuss, the story beats of every single episode, but let's just go through. Let's start with episode 1, Legend of the Golden Witch. What would your guys' favorite parts and least favorite parts, and what kind of sticks out to you as you reflect now on episode 1?
I'd like to start episode 1 because a lot of people don't like episode 1. It's understandable. Once you see what follows after episode 1 and the trip that you just go on after chapter 1, it's very easy to overlook chapter 1. But I think from a very haunting atmosphere, it's one of my favorites. Particularly because you, the reader, don't know that Beatrice is a thing. You've heard about Beatrice, but you've never seen her actual sprite. You've never seen all the witchcraft and everything. It's like, is one of the characters that I'm playing or reading, are they the killer? And that's what I love about chapter 1, is that it always keeps you guessing. It is, as I kind of say, it's a little bit too close to Higurashi, but it's true. It takes the idea of you don't know what's going on, and it makes a really good chapter out of that. The only thing I don't really like is that, it falls short compared to later chapters because Beatrice just sells the series.
I mean, with that trademark laugh, can you blame it?
Yeah, I think definitely one of the strongest parts of episode 1 to me was the fact that when you get to the end, you are so on the hairline of, is magic real, is magic not real? Like, it leaves perfectly enough room for it to be either. But then in the tea party, it's just like, hey, it's Beatrice, guys!
Hi, it's Beatrice! Fuck you, everyone!
It just throws everything out the window and perfectly sets up how all of your expectations just get completely subverted going into episode 2.
At least when it came to magic, Higurashi waited until, like, chapter, 7 to introduce characters like Hanyu. But this game was like, fuck it, witches are real. Here you go.
Yeah, Sabata, do you have anything in particular about episode 1 that stood out to you?
Well, since I was still kind of new to the whole visual novel scene, I'd say the first thing that kind of stuck out to me during episode 1 was, well, the first Twilight. I was kind of used to the dark moments. I was kind of getting used to some of the darker, psychological elements to Higurashi, but whenever the first Twilight occurred and how it got really descriptive, kind of me being kind of a pansy, I just kind of felt that churning in my stomach as I just kept reading these.
Oh, chapter 2 must have been fun for you.
Oh my god!
The literal churning in the stomachs.
Oh yeah!
There was some fantastic line in episode 1, which was like, when the inheritance was revealed, all of their stomachs will rupture and bile will go everywhere. And I was like, he knew what he was writing for episode 2 already.
Oh yeah!
I guarantee you had probably up to episode 4 already done by that point.
He
Yeah,
probably
we can talk about
started with
Land of the Golden Witch a bit later on, but I think there definitely was a lot of planning that had to go into this.
Land of the Golden Witch.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the dark about that.
I'll talk about it a bit when we're talking on episode 3, because I have a lot of theories that revolve around it. I think definitely the main thing that stood out to me about that first Twilight was the fact that it was like 6 murders at once.
Right.
At the time I wasn't super into like detective fiction, though I was still kind of familiar with it, but I was very much used to the like, oh, there's one murder and we spend the whole book figuring out what happens. But the whole serial murders thing had never really crossed into my line of sight. So that was really wacky, just having 6 people die right out the gate.
Right, and at
Yeah.
the time, that's basically a third of the cast is just fucking gone, just like that. Just
Well,
gone.
not to mention the previous scene involved George and Shannon's little relationship being talked about, and then that happens.
Well, I mean, that was a death flag right there.
Yeah, and even Rudolph and Kyrie had that moment where Rudolph's like, I'm probably gonna die tonight, and then he dies, and you're like, wait, what? What does he
the hell
know?
just happened?
07 pulled that throughout the entire series.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my god. It was nice getting closure on that, but god, that was we'll talk about 7 and 8 later.
We will.
Yeah.
What about you,
definitely.
Newt? Was there anything in episode 1 that really stood out to you I haven't spoken on?
Well, after finishing Higurashi, I already knew it was going to be a slower start because that's how he started off Higurashi. It was a very world-building episode for the first one. So I was already knew shit was going to hit the fan at some point. So I was just enjoying the ride as much as possible and trying to get, character information, see where everyone was standing. I would say the Tea Party, when everyone started disappearing and started to crumble back into death, when they kept saying like, oh, deny mystery, or deny the fantasy. That really stuck to me, and I took that with me for a very long time into the story. And that was my main drive for actually trying to solve everything.
I mean, what about you, Fox and Sabato? Did you guys go out of episode 1 thinking that the witch was real, that magic was real, or were you still trying to fight?
Me, I kind of get too emotional, I admit, whenever I get really into a story. So whenever the end of episode 1 came about, Personally, I was having trouble deciding which one was really the thing I had to go for. Was it magic, or was it not? It was my first time experiencing, well, I would say Umineko is definitely one of the first times I've experienced, I think, I don't know the right word, a medium that was able to shift the narrative to make it appear completely fantastical, and it was up to me to kind of see, okay, what actually happened during this scene.
What I went out of chapter 1, and forgive me for saying chapter, I'm used to Higurashi, but going out of chapter 1, I decided then and there that I was going to be that guy that decided to play devil's advocate with the series. Arguing on humans' behalf, but also agreeing with both magic and whatnot, so I could look at both sides. What I personally thought changed throughout the series, but at the very end, I thought this has to be possible for humans. There's no way that it can't. If it can't be possible for humans, then the series is pretty much just a witch just fucking with everyone for 8 chapters. So there has to be some way that this was happening. But I could see either way being there, and throughout my Let's Play, I expressed, hey, if you believe in the witch side, it's definitely gearing towards this, but for human side, you could argue this. And that was my main drive throughout the series. until chapter 5 introduced the fucking detective.
Oh boy.
I think it was pretty much the same for me as you, Fox, where I thought that both sides had a valuable perspective. It was just trying to figure out which parts were important. But I also very much left episode 1 with the feeling that, like, if magic is the answer, what the hell is the rest of the story going to be about?
Exactly.
I could see him pull a whole troll on everything and actually just have magic be the answer to everything.
It might actually be. For all we know, it could be the actual answer, and it's just enjoying everyone making theories.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point to lead into episode 2. I think episode 2 for me was it still remains probably my favorite in terms of how well it is written. I wouldn't call it my favorite episode, but I think that the way that it is put together and the way that it subverts your expectations and the way that all of the mysteries are constructed to teach you about how the story is unfolding is really, really spectacular. Especially once we start to get to the closed rooms that seem genuinely impossible.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, the headaches I had from those.
You know, all of the ones in episode 1 seemed kind of plausible, but in episode 2 it was just like, screw you.
I thought that she was just using closed rooms throughout chapter 2 just because it was a new chapter. I had no idea that that was just going to be her favorite thing to do throughout the entire fucking series. But actually going into chapter 2, we get introduced to one of the semi-stronger points of the series and at the same time weaker points. And we'll get into why it's weaker later, but the romance. The romance... Now, I will admit I do like a little bit of romance in the stories. I don't mind it. In fact, it actually kept me entertained. It was a nice distraction from the depression that was happening outside of the romance. And I really felt like, you know, starting this chapter with romance, it was a very good chapter that would eventually lead on to chapter 6. And that kept me interested throughout the series, was the romance that was going on. A lot of people will look at the romance and go, it's a murder mystery series, I don't care about the romance. But the romance, I mean, romance is not 07's strong point, but he actually was able to do something, like, actually pretty good with the romance. So going from that, I felt that it was pretty good.
I think one of the things regarding the romance, especially early in the story for me, was I came into the story knowing about Nox and Van Dyne being a part of it. I didn't know how their roles would actually unfold later on.
See, I did not.
I wish I knew that.
Yeah, I knew jack shit about Van Dyne and Nox.
Yeah, I knew that they were referenced, and I knew that Van Dyne, his third rule basically says that there should be no love interest in the story. So when we got a love interest, it's like super early in episode 1 and then fleshing it out more in episode 2, I was like, okay, something's going on with this. Like, we need to pay attention to this a little bit. And I was still really caught up in trying to solve the mysteries rather than paying attention to the characters. But I did very much go in with the perception of episode 2 that there was a reason that he was explicitly ignoring rules that I knew he was actually writing in accordance with.
We're gonna get into the two love characters and why only half of them are pretty much actual characters, and the other half are supporting roles at best, which depressed me.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that point a bit?
We're gonna talk about George and Jessica later, but I'll be honest and say it right here. At least for Jessica, George actually fleshed out to be his own character more so, but Jessica was a literal plot device for canon. Like, I read and I tried to see how, you know, like, she really didn't do much, and I felt like 07 could have done a lot more, especially coming from Higurashi, where everyone got their own arc. It was sad to see that Jessica and George were pushed more towards the, like, wayside.
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent that's partially because they had such a large cast of characters that they were trying to flesh out. Jessica very much did get her moments in episode 2, especially with the cultural festival at the start and things like that.
Oh, the cultural festival was fantastic.
It was good.
That caught me so off guard when the actual, like, concert section started playing.
Oh, God.
Oh my god. That was great.
But, I mean, I think that Jessica, even though she's definitely one of the less fleshed out characters in the story, you can't you can't say that she isn't significant and that the parts of her that are fleshed out are explained properly. Like, every aspect that she plays into the story is valid and worked out.
So I want to talk about more about Chapter 2, but we'll put a pin on Jessica later.
Sounds
But
good.
I mean, in terms of Chapter 2, even Birkenstow was like that this chapter was unfair. And to be honest, yeah, we got red text and we were introduced to red text and like nothing more. So it was really just about trying to get around the red text.
It's funny you mentioned the red text because as soon as that popped up, I think that was the moment in episode 2 that I started really getting into Umineko as a whole. Because as soon as like a new red text pop up, I would find myself just writing it down so I could keep it as a note in case something pops up again.
Right.
And I was starting to get really invested in the story. And as soon as like I said, another red text popped up, I would bring out my notebook and just start writing it down.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the red text did for me is, first of all, it told me, like, hey, he wants you to solve the story.
Don't give up yet.
The other thing is even though it was kind of like a bit of a word game, and it's like, here in red, I will speak the truth that claims that when I speak in red, I'm speaking the truth, and it's like, you can't do that. You can't tell that you're telling the truth in the thing that you're telling the truth with. That defeats the purpose of a proof.
But it worked.
But it also made a very good case for me that Ryukashi was there and throwing evidence in your face that he wants you to just trust. Like, I found, especially when looking back in editing episode 1, there were a lot of things and hints that seemed really far-fetched and super obvious, and I was like, oh, that has to be a red herring, but really it ended up just being evidence.
He really abused his trust, though, later with that red text.
I don't necessarily agree, but we can get to that.
We can get to that. Please tell me, too, that you wrote down Butler's incompetent in red.
Oh, definitely.
Yes, I did.
I think I've edited the "you are incompetent" text over random parts of the playthrough several times at this point. Is there anything else about episode 2 that you guys particularly wanted to cover?
I found myself liking the interactions between Battler and Beatrice whenever it introduced the what is it called? The meta world?
Yeah, the purgatory space in episode 2 is a fantastic introduction.
I agree.
I think it very much sets up the relationship between those characters really well. The whole talkings of, like, eternal torture and how the game is going to play out not only is, like, just fantastically dramatic, but especially when you're going back on a reread, you're like, oh!
Yeah, like that moment of realization just hits you.
I have actually not reread yet. I decided to read the whole series first before going back. But
I'm kind of in the middle of rereading episode 2 right now.
I've actually been rereading basically the whole time because I was editing about 2 chapters behind where we were playing. So I'm effectively on my 3rd reread at the moment. I've gone through episodes 1 to 4 so many times that there are scenes that I could almost recite off by heart at this point.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I like chapter 2. It was pretty strong. Like I would say it was one of those chapters where when you compare it to the rest of the chapters, it's all right. It's not bad and it's not that good. I would probably put it at around 4th or 5th best, really. But, I mean, Chapter 2 did introduce a lot of key things that would later pop up in the series.
I mean, I think especially the entire opening sequence of Episode 2 is just like, hey, it's the culprit! Look, everyone! It's the answer! Right here!
It really was.
And it's just so in your face, but in like a really roundabout way so that you don't catch it the first time through. But then when you reread it, you're like, oh, I'm a fucking idiot.
Right, and there could be multiple different culprits, and we'll get to who we believe the culprits are, but I think I mean, unless one of you has a different idea, I think we all have the same
I'm pretty
idea
sure
what the
we're all on
culprit
the
is.
same page.
Yeah.
Let's talk about episode 3 then. I think episode 3 is definitely my least favorite, but I don't think it's bad.
Oh my god, yeah.
I think the fact that episode 3 is my least favorite speaks volumes for how amazing the rest of the story is, because I love episode 3.
Oh yeah, definitely. Episode 3. I think episode 3 definitely greatly magnified my interest in the series, and that was at the moment where I became 100% completely hooked.
Yeah,
I'm really gonna I'm gonna agree a little bit with Jacono over there, but God, I am going
Come on,
to
hate on
disagree.
it. Just hate on it. I want to hear all the hate, and I'm gonna fight you.
I am going to disagree with that. Chapter 3 is a fun chapter to read. Is it good? Yeah, it's important to the story. It introduces more concepts, but I mean, we're gonna go over this in the character thing.
No,
but let's
tell us
just
why.
get
Just
to
tell us why you hate it. Just tell us why
Just
you hate
let
it.
it
I
out.
want to
Let's
fight
hear
you.
it.
I want to fight you.
Fucking Evatris was way too goddamn cruel. Oh my god. There is
Oh
a
my
point
God,
where
that scene made me sick to my stomach.
Humans generally do not like to see the pain of innocence. And while I'm not going to say that the Ushiromiya family is, a bunch of angels, they did not deserve
Oh,
Oh
hell
my
no.
god. Like, by the time she started with Natsui and Cross, I had already given up. I was just done. I was like, we need to get to chapter 4.
I feel like that's one of the strengths of this episode, though, is the fact that Evatris goes so over the top that you just hate her guts for
But
it.
there's a line that 07 crossed 15 miles ago.
But the fact that
You
he
mean
crosses
involving
that line
Rosa
is
and
why
Maria?
the chapter is so compelling, because you're so, like... That's the whole thing with the Northwind and the Sun strategy that's pulled out, is that it's totally Beatrice pulling the strings of Evatris to, like, set
Yeah.
up this whole ploy.
She actually had me fooled. I'm not gonna lie. I actually believed Beatrice was turning good.
Oh, she had me hook, line, and sinker.
The thing to me is I knew that it was all a ploy, but I was so happy with it being a ploy because that just made it so much better in my mind. The fact that it was like all just a ruse the whole way through, and even though it was just a ruse, there is still some truth to it that we get into later in the story, which we can talk about. But I think that it's absolutely fantastic, and that entire scene with the web of red and just how absolutely ludicrously tight that red truth is a fantastic way to cap off episode 3. As much
that's
as you
what I
can
loved
hate on
most about
Evatris for
it.
being too cruel, I think that's one of the stronger parts of episode 3.
I would say that's my favorite part. Honestly, the whole red web. I mean, that's when I actually started getting my culprit theory, because I just sat there and went through every single possible scenario where I could just weasel through it. And when she didn't say about the personality thing, and she just said, "Oh, Jessica couldn't do anything," instead of saying there's no multiple personalities, that's when I knew I nailed her.
Yeah, multiple personalities is brought up and just straight up told to you.
I gotta mention, while I do not like chapter 3 and that it basically, like, seriously, I felt depressed reading it. Chapter 3 is probably, when I think of Umineko, chapter 3 is the first thing I think of, and specifically Rosa's death throughout chapter 3. The Jellicoe, the Jello Ocean is immediately what I think of when someone mentions Umineko. Is that whole scene.
Oh god, don't even
It's a
remind
really
me.
weird vision.
And the music. The Dance of the Moon Rabbits was the best thing. Oh, and the Moon Rabbits.
Oh yeah.
That's when I gave up. Because it was like, all right, magical human, yeah, people get dressed up. And then rabbit people, like straight out of Playboy, appeared.
I think one of the funniest things on a reread about the Chiesta sisters was actually that in the like Golden Land scene after the Web of Red, they straight up tell you what the Chiesta sisters are. They're just like, oh yeah, they're just Lady Maria's servants, and they're a band of rabbits. But because they haven't introduced you to the ceramic dolls that appear in episode 4 yet, it just goes completely over your head.
Oh yeah, I don't even remember that part at all.
Yeah, I only noticed it when I was editing.
I was just kind of besides myself just seeing Toho characters fucking appear in my Umineko series.
Yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. I think, though, to me, the weak part of episode 3 is not all of the cruelty and all of the fucking anime fight scenes, because I thought that was hilarious as shit. That was just trying to be tropey.
Oh, those were fantastic.
Yeah, like, it was trying to be silly, and I thought it did a really good job of it. The weak part to me about episode 3 is just how long it spent explaining concepts.
Oh
Like,
my god.
there is an entire chapter that is basically an hour long to read through that is just saying the same thing over and over again so many times that it's almost more confusing by the end. And that's the Hempel's Raven scene.
Eva finding the gold. Oh my god.
Oh no, that's
That-
what I needed. That's why I use the most.
Well, yeah, I mean that
Well,
was important,
yeah.
but the amount of detail that they gave, but not giving away the answer, like, oh, it has something to do with an atlas. All right, well, you guys in the audience who are reading, have fun with that, and then that's it.
When I went through and solved the epitaph, I did it, I think, after chapter 12 of episode 3.
Chapter 12 of episode
I have no idea
3?
when that is.
What do you mean by chapter 12?
So each time the like transition fade at the end of each of the sequences.
The glass. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there were 12 videos that we did in episode 3, and then I solved the epitaph because I was like, God damn it, Ava did it, I can do it as well.
So you guys solved the epitaph early, because I solved
Yeah.
it like literally right before it was announced.
No, I think definitely one of the things for me was that I wanted to try solve things as early as possible. I was fighting hard to actually come up with answers. But I thought that episode 3 did a really good job of showing you how much stuff was possible.
Episode 3 was definitely like really good in just introducing things. The one, like, okay, besides the psychopath that was just fucking chainsawing everyone left and right and keep introducing us to the cruel concept of keep bringing them back from the dead to kill them again.
You mean the character whose laugh sounds like you're trying to start an old van?
Right. The only thing that I think is a weak point of chapter 3, and this is remedied in chapter 4 really quickly, is they introduced one of the most central characters in the series as a pseudo Deus Ex. I cannot see Angie's introduction as anything but Deus Ex to chapter 3. It wraps up the plot, it gets Butler out of his funk, and it just wraps up the story, and then we go into the tea party in question marks. I was like, who the fuck is this bitch?
Exactly.
Where did she come from?
I pretty quickly guessed who it was.
Oh yeah, me too. The fact that she has the
yeah.
same colored hair as Butler, I mean.
That actually didn't even factor into my decision at all, come to think of it. But
they mentioned her like twice. They mentioned
Yeah,
her
no,
twice, and then all of a sudden, like, most important character.
yeah, I mean, I had a wild conspiracy theory involving the boat captain going that actually ended up being completely true in
What?
episode 4.
What?
What? Okay, we got to hear this later in our theories.
I'll mention it quickly because it happened in episode 2, but I was basically, when I was editing episode 1, I noticed that the only two characters that got name drops other than the Ashurmia family and the servants was the captain of the plane and Angie. And I was like, all right, they're both appearing later. And then lo and behold, the boat captain appears with the plane captain's name and takes Angie to the island. And I said that was going to happen, and it happened.
I thought you were going to say the conspiracy like he's Beatrice.
Oh, we had some wacky ideas, but that was essentially the mainstay of it.
See, that's what I liked about your Let's Play, and I have not watched Sabatas yet, but one of the differences between our Let's Plays and his is that he had people to bounce ideas off of. I was alone the whole time.
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't have even finished the story if I didn't have Magus going through with me, because like it was just so. I find visual novels so clunky that having someone there to read through it is kind of like a key part of the experience for me.
Shout out to him if he's watching.
Oh,
He
yeah.
probably is.
Shout out to Magus, my boy. I think probably the only other thing I'd say about episode 3 before we move on is that episode 3 very much makes a good case for the fact that the riddle is the answer. Which is not something that I think is ever explicitly said in the series, but it's very much a theme that comes up in that the most impossible puzzles are the ones that give you the answers. So, like, there are so few ways that you can escape the web of red without just saying that there are lies.
True.
And that's kind of what, can give away the culprit, and that's how Newt and I got it so early. I don't know about either of you two, Sabato or Fox.
End of chapter 6, I had an idea, and then beginning of 7, I was like,
Yeah.
I can't argue against what I
Yeah.
think.
Because the end of episode 6 is the second one. It's the second impossible puzzle, and it's the one that basically gives you the answer before they just show you it effectively in episode 7.
Well, I know whenever I had the red web, it gave me possibly one of the biggest headaches trying to figure it out, because I had all of the red written down. I was trying to go through every possibility, And then it wasn't until like maybe episode 5 or 6 that the idea of multiple personalities stuck. So then I tried going at that angle, and then slowly that's whenever I started to be like, oh, there's the answer.
I think there was actually one thing in episode 3 that really got me caught up, and that was that they basically say that all of the keys were still in the rooms, and thus it makes it impossible that the culprit could have escaped out of the locked room circle at the beginning of episode 3. But I found out at some point that the translation for key in Japanese includes a key that is like affixed to the door so you can lock it from the inside.
Really?
So there's actually a bit of a translational issue that makes episode 3 a tad easier.
I mean, hell, most of my initial ones were just opening the door, locking it from the inside, and then closing the door when you just walk out. Because in any, at least American door, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was kind of a little broken at that point, so I stopped doing that because it just never got addressed. But
I think the Japanese definition of locks I've discovered since browsing the internet is actually a bit more difficult to translate because they qualify things differently. So, like, the thing you're describing would effectively be the auto lock on Kinzo's room.
Don't get me started on the epitaph. That was translation nightmare for me.
Oh, I never even touched any Japanese. Fuck that.
So let's talk about episode 4. I think episode 4 remains to be one of my favorites.
It's a good episode.
It was pretty
I'm
good.
not gonna say that it's my favorite, but yeah, it's pretty fucking good.
I think the main weakness of episode 4 is just it's really poorly paced.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a long time to get interesting, and then once it gets interesting, the dialogue just repeats itself so many times that you're like, okay, we get it. She's tearing a page out of Maria's diary. We get it. We get it.
So here's the thing that is Chapter 4's strength and weakness at the same time. The trials and tribulations of Angie. Oh. So here's the thing. If you love Angie as a character and she's your favorite character, oh my god, this chapter is going to be pretty good. It's going to basically... it's going to give you a lot of in-depth intel into who Angie is, and it's going to basically show you that she's one of the more central characters because they're dedicating the whole thing to you. But if you are more into the Legend of Rokenjima and the battle between Butler and Beatrice, oh my god, does Angie's story drag?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just didn't like the switching back and forth.
I really hooked with Angie's story, but I still found that it just took so long for the game board to get started that I was like, come on, just hurry up a little bit.
Please, you're almost there.
Yeah, especially because there was, as I said, a lot of just repeating of concepts. Like, the entire scenes where Angie was going around and meeting the descendants of the victims could have been summarized in maybe, like, 4 pages.
But her meeting the descendants of some of the victims was one of the more important things in the series that actually got me to solve the epitaph later.
Well, yeah, I think it was definitely significant, but there was a lot of just chaff that could
There was a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of fluff. So getting past, like, we'll go into the trials and tribulations of Angie, but basically she makes a deal with the devil, and then the devil gives her exactly what she wants. She just has to do what the devil says. Did I say devil? I mean Birkenstell. But,
of course.
But it's you've heard this story before. It's basically like Faust almost in what Angie does, and she gets her wishes. But, yeah, they're not exactly... It's almost a monkey paws thing with the wishes. Going into the actual chapter, this chapter introduced us to a way to fight the witches, which never was given to us before, and I wish was given when fucking Evatris was going around, but whatever. Blue Truth, or as I call it, Blue Theory. It is probably one of the most interesting ideas ever, in that if nothing is stated in red, you can form whatever the fuck you want around Blue Truth.
And the red would have to counter it.
Yeah. I think actually the fact that you bring up there, Sabata, is actually one of the weaknesses of the Blue Truth, is that, like, initially it's like, oh yes, it must be responded to in 60 seconds, and if it's not responded to, then it's a victory by default. But then those rules just disappear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then when a certain other character in the next chapter goes in, they give that character all the time, the world. But we're going to talk
Well,
about
no,
that
they
character
redid
later.
it so that it was just, oh, I just had to counter at the very end of the game. Like they literally just went back and said that.
Yeah, they at least explained it.
Yeah, I mean, Sabata, what stood out the most to you about episode 4?
Besides the introduction of, well, actually the introduction was at the end of episode 3, but kind of going into Angie as a character. Despite how some people said it kind of dragged on, I can kind of I can obviously agree that yeah, it did kind of go on longer than it needed to. I kind of already understood and got the gist of what Angie kind of was going through. Not really saying that I get what she was going through, but I can understand it.
Yeah.
So I feel like that section could have been shortened just a little bit, kind of reiterating what a lot of people have said, I think, or what I've heard. But I don't know, my summary was just that. It was long, it could have been shortened up, but I feel that, me personally, I found myself actually, despite it being long, I kind of enjoyed this. It was kind of a break from the game board, less of a headache, and that way, with Angie's story, I was able to kind of relax, but also I was still able to theorize with the events that I've seen.
I think the twofold purpose of Angie's story to me is like it is a bit of a break, but also the fact that it drags on is kind of almost an embodiment of the fact that she's been alone for so long.
This was fixed in chapter 6, though, with the storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there are different perspectives on it, and I still think that it definitely does drag on too long, but the writer in me is like, I see what he was doing here. He was dragging it out
Right.
because it dragged out for Angie.
For sure.
So, one of the things that I noticed about chapter 4 is that it spawned probably more theories out of me than anything else, including Dark Bottler theory, which I kept on
Really?
believing until the beginning of chapter 5, when the Red Truth just completely was like, no, fuck that.
I was so disappointed with that Red Truth.
Dark Bottler theory works in the first 4 chapters, but like a lot of theories came out of chapter 4, and I really like it.
See, the thing I picked up from chapter 4 was the white magic versus black magic is what I was really just keying
I forgot
into.
about that.
Because I started realizing, oh, I know what he's about to do. He's going to start flipping and be like, yeah, are you going to deny this magic too? Because that was the whole scene with the old bitch on the island tearing up Angie, Maria's diary. Like, it's, destroying all of this magic. And I started realizing that he's going to start turning it this way. And that not all magic's bad, actually. And maybe we shouldn't just deny everything.
Yeah, that was one thing for me in editing episode 4. I got so frustrated with myself because in episode 4 I went in with such a anti-fantasy mindset that I was just like, fuck this, and what's the trick here, and what's the trick there? But so much of episode 4 was actually just telling you the truth, and I fought that
We
hard.
didn't get on the witch's side yet, which is one of the... I can understand why we're still like, no, has to be human. And then chapter 5 and on, we're like, well, now we're on the witch's side.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the game is kind of paced with that in mind. But it doesn't make it any less frustrating for me to watch myself be that much of an idiot as I'm editing it.
Oh, for sure.
Because I'm like, God damn it! He was just telling you what magic is, and you're trying to figure out what trick he's playing on you.
It was obviously bombs in the food.
Clearly.
Small bombs is the best thing that came out of episode 4. Oh, it's so good. The other thing before we move on from episode 4 is that final showdown in the tea party is just fantastic.
Oh my god, it was
so
perfect.
good.
Like Dream and Discharger playing behind
Oh
that
my
first
God,
part of the
yes.
fight is just absolutely gorgeous, encapsulating all of these themes from previously in the game. And then also the fact that episode 4's tea party kind of just sets up what the motive is going into
Oh, yeah.
episode 5, and I thought that was wonderful.
Then the question marks.
Oh yes.
Of course.
Ugh.
Why not? God.
It was fantastically silly.
It was. I won't lie. The chapter 4's ending, yeah, it was one of the best battles ever, and I do agree, having like different key points of the music beforehand, like the whatever, I forget the name of the song, whatever the fuck plays when you first see the first murder.
In episode 1?
Golden Slaughter.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
Golden Slaughter.
Oh, that's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah. I think the one thing before we go into 5, we didn't even mention the battle between Beatrice and Virgilia.
Yeah. I mean, didn't exist, right? I mean, that's what I got at the very end of it. It's like, there's no point in really even seeing this stuff, at least when I was in that mindset, that all this magical stuff, it just didn't matter at that point.
I'll talk about that conflict once we get to the end of all the chapters, when I can talk about Land of the Golden Witch, because that, to me, very heavily ties into that notion. I think the other thing, before we move on from episode 4 as well, is all of the music in episode 4, and this is something that I just recently had a discussion with Magus about it, was all of the music in episode 4 is very literal, especially if you look back across episodes 1 to 3. There's a lot of juxtaposition in terms of like creepy music playing in calm scenes and calm music playing in creepy scenes.
Oh, he
and that
loves
kind of
doing
thing.
that. That is just something he does.
The music kind of tells you like the true underlying motive of what's going on. But in episode 4, for the first time, a lot of the music actually just matches the scene. And I think that really goes to show from a musical perspective how episode 4 is actually just telling the truth, because the music is matching rather than subverting what it should be.
Here's the thing going over that and why I chose not to do voices. I don't know about you guys, but one of the things that the music coupled with not hearing the characters' voices did for me was it gave me, going back to chapter 1, it actually gave me, the whole System Zero scene where Natsui's pointing the gun at other people. Listening to the voices, they were all very calm. I imagine they were frantically shouting, especially Natsui, because you didn't know who was the killer and who was not. And so I think the music really just amps up everything, especially when things get like very, very serious. So
I think that's one of the strong points of Umineko. It knows, 90% of the time, it knows when to play a certain track. And whenever it plays it, you get the emotion of that scene.
So, who wants to talk about Chapter 5 and the Legend of the Blue-Haired Bitch?
Oh, please.
Oh my god.
I would love to talk about her.
Take us away, Newt.
Oh, she was the perfect addition to the story, I have to say. Without her, this story would not even compare to anything else. Without her, it's horrible in my eyes, because what she did to me, at least, it was just holding up a mirror to my face, saying, "Oh, hey, you know what you've been doing this entire time? This is you." And it was
you're an asshole.
awful. No, the entire time
You're
it was.
a fucking asshole.
It was. And it was just sitting there being like, I had the exact same mindset. Every single time I said to do something, she'd end up doing it. And it was just awful. Oh.
It was crazy how in sync you were with her.
The fact that Erica was so predictable of a character was almost problematic, because it was very much like, oh, she's a reflection of the reader. I see what's going on here.
That's what hated me, because I ended up just hating myself at that point and being like, oh, God, I'm disgusting.
Yeah.
I think one of the other interesting things about Erica, though, is not just that she is a reflection on the reader and people that are taking it too seriously and not caring about the characters, which I definitely fell for as well, but also a lot of Umineko is a reflection on old detective fiction and the golden age of detective fiction. That's like when Knox and Van Dyne were writing. And Erica is almost a parody or a recreation of detectives in the golden age of detective fiction who just show up, solve a mystery, and then hop on the next train and leave. They don't give a shit about anyone that they're in the story with.
She's very Sherlock Holmesy in that she comes in, does a mystery, and then it's like, well, time to leave. But she takes it to a whole new level in that she's... Eureka, which, by the way, Furuta Eureka's name, that was the best thing ever. Going into Eureka, like, she really just did not care about anyone. She was an intellectual rapist. Like, that's pretty much her character.
Exactly.
The funny thing is it's like, she's like, oh yes, I am an intellectual rapist, and I'm like, why are you proud of that?
Why are you proud of it? Who goes around and says they're an intellectual rapist? I'm pretty sure if I go around and say that, people are going to question things.
Yeah. I also love that she used the Hercule Poirot, my little gray cells line constantly.
I had no idea what that meant. I was just, God, you're just annoying.
Yeah, no, it's actually a pretty common catchphrase from Hercule Poirot, which is one of Agatha Christie's main detectives. Poirot was kind of like famously a bit on both sides, where he'd be a very welcoming and friendly character, but then at other times would just completely switch off and not care about anyone that he was with, to the point where Agatha Christie almost like stopped writing about him because she was becoming so frustrated with his character.
I feel like 07 had a lot of fun with his character,
Oh,
almost
yeah,
as much as
sure.
Beatrice.
Definitely.
Like, in a sick, twisted way. But, like, I'm sad. The one thing I don't like is that she did not get that much. Like, she got 2 chapters worth of screen time, but unlike Beatrice, like, after chapter 6, it was like, no. You get half a chapter 8 at best.
Well, yeah, she was banished to oblivion.
Exactly.
Yep.
I have a perspective on that, where, and I guess I can bring up Land of the Golden Witch now. It's probably the appropriate time, but initially for episode 3, the episode was going to be Land of the Golden Witch, and then people became so frustrated with how difficult episode 2 was that Ryukishi rewrote it and scattered the storylines amongst episodes 4 to 6.
I mean, I have heard some of this stuff.
And originally,
Really?
yeah, originally, as far as I'm aware, Vigilia and Erica were going to be one character called
God.
Vigilius.
I'm just having a hard time trying to imagine a fusion of those two
God,
characters.
that'd be brutal.
Here's the thing, though. Is I imagined that it was going to be very much along the lines of a helpful detective, but who took things too much at face value. That was my interpretation. But here's the
Right.
thing, is when we get into episode 6 and looking at Hachijo Ikuko, and her role at writing the story, when she has a hand in writing the story is when Vigilia appears, and then when her writing style plays in its strongest, which is where she starts with the end and works back to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As she mentions in episode 8. The 2 episodes that start with the end and work back to it are episode 5 and 6. So I think Vigilius, who then became Vigilia and Erica, is actually Hachijo Ikuko's insert into the story.
Oh, child of
That's
man.
an interesting thought process.
And I think that's why Erica has those 2 episodes, because they're the 2 that like Ikuko wrote for herself.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they start at the end and work back to the beginning.
Well, she was like really into writing detective novels and stuff like that and mysteries. So I mean, it would make sense that she would write a detective character.
I could see Hachijo's like Hachijo writing a detective novel, having Erika being the main character. That's just the type of writer I would see her as, like having a dick detective.
Yeah, what with feather and all.
Oh my god. Yeah, and I guess on that note, I mean, is there much more to chapter 5? I mean,
I think the only other thing I'd say about chapter 5 is it does a really good job of explaining the relationship between Purgatory, Battler, and Beatrice really well, where there's that entire discussion with Vigilia talking about trusting the person on the other side of the game board.
Mhm.
It also drops another huge hint with the red text given by Natsui about Shannon, which we'll get into later. But yeah, the fact that Shannon was the only one that knew about her favorite time of the seasons, like that comes into play later, depending on who you believe the culprit is.
Well, the other thing with that, though, is also just how well it was expressed how different Lambda Delta's game board style was. Like, the entire scene of Battler leaping out the window and catching Beatrice as they fell through the rain was just fucking cheesy as shit.
It
Oh,
was
yeah.
great. Oh,
it was just
I
cheesy
can't
and
believe
boring.
we almost forgot. The Court of Heaven. This is their big debut. Oh,
yeah.
my
Oh,
god.
yeah.
Delanor was so fucking good, as well as Gertrude and Cornelia. It really like going back to chapter 1, you can really just imagine these characters being in the background, making sure everything is airtight. But now we actually get to see them.
The weird thing to me though is like Beatrice in episode 2 is like, oh yes, here's a rule that I just came up with, and then in episode 5 it's like, oh yeah, Heaven uses it. It's like,
Heaven
what?
uses.
Oh, I totally
did this
made
happen?
this up.
Are you sure you made it, Beatrice? Are you absolutely sure? One of the things about that scene though that really messed with my head was I feel like the layers between the meta world and the human world were just melding into each other. There was a lot of times I swore to God that the characters on the Game Boy were interacting with Delanor and the others when really they should have been. Like, it kept on jumping back and forth. I didn't know what was going on.
I think in episode 5 and 6, I tried really hard to straighten out the orders of the different layers of the worlds or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, once we got to the end of episode 8, I just all see it as one writing thing. It's like the game board up to the very top is just all written. It's all one world. It's all an author trying to tell one story. I think trying to separate the worlds will give you some clarity about how the story is being told, but I don't think there's any particular value in saying that the stories are completely separate, because they're obviously still all telling one collective story.
Yeah, by episode 8, I just kind of
Right.
threw that out the window and said, yeah, I'm just giving up now.
Just fuck it.
Yeah, because one of the things is, like, you know, in a TV show where you have, like, the characters start a conversation, take a half-hour drive, and then they're on the next half of the sentence, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's that kind of storytelling where even though they are, in theory, other things have happened, for the vessel of telling you the story, they've kind of suspended the disbelief of things that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much you can suspend disbelief before you're like, fuck it.
Well, I mean, it's just to move time forward, because it's not. There's no point in having a 30-minute drive and them just talking the entire time. It would just kill.
Well, yeah,
it would
but
kill the
that's
flow.
what I'm saying is, like, it's the same with Umineko. Like, there's no point in having the characters in Purgatory also explaining the same things as characters on the game board. The fact that there's kind of a flow in the conversations between the layers is to help tell the story.
Because it would get
Right.
really chunky if everything started having conversations on every single level about how
Yeah.
it's supposed to work.
And it's interesting that 07 was able to write that way. But going into chapter 6, chapter 6 opened up pretty interestingly, I gotta say.
Yeah.
That was something I was not expecting. 2 new characters out of the blue, and the bitch in a wedding dress was just something I didn't know was going
I gotta
on.
say, by the time the wedding came around at the end of episode 6, I'd almost completely forgotten about it.
Oh, same here. Same here.
It was like, oh yeah, this happened.
I'm pretty sure I did say that.
I kept on making jokes about it. I if I remember, like, I was like, and you fucking end up marrying this person? How the fuck did you mess this up?
No, that just went one ear out the other.
I now understand Beato's games. Start of that episode. Nope.
And it was also an excellent example of starting at the end and
Mhm.
working back to it, especially with all of the side cutaways to Battler in the Logic era before they actually explained what that was.
It was great seeing how those
That was
scenes
just
tied
a
in.
trip.
Yeah, the fact that they had basically been showing you the Logic era the entire episode and then told you what it was right at the end was like, oh, I see what's happened here.
I mean, I figured it was.
Definitely one of the things that I felt about episode 6 is that there was a certain sense of inevitability.
Mhm.
Like, right at the start when Battler's preparing the game board, Ronave is like, oh yes, watch out for the Logic errors, and then
You
a
said
Logic
that
error
one
happens.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
He easily jinxed
I
it.
called it. I was like, he's totally gonna do that.
I mean, of course it was. Why else would they bring it up? That's what
Why
I'm
else
saying.
would they
It's like
bring
there
it
was
up?
definitely a sense of inevitability in episode 6. I think the only
Well-
thing that really came out of the blue was Erica being the culprit.
That she didn't utilize the detective's authority.
Before we get into that, we got to talk about the love series part 2.
Oh yes.
Yep.
So this is when the boards that are known as Jessica and George actually don't become boards anymore. They're actually good characters. They do show off a little bit more of their personality. George a little bit more than Jessica, especially at the end of chapter 4, with when George was like, "I kill everyone on Rokunjima." You know, actually that set up for a lot of people. I actually know a couple people, or at least one person that set George up to be a possible culprit, and it really can be.
Well, yeah.
If you look at things in different ways, but the fact that George chose his mother shows me that he's a much more developed and well-written character than Jessica could ever be, because she let chance decide, oh, it's gonna be Kiri. But I mean, they were both great in their own right, and it when I saw that people were dying, and once I saw that Beatrice and then Bottler joined in, it took me a little bit to realize that they were actually creating the first Twilight. And this is the first time in the series where we got to see the first Twilight actually happen from the witch's perspective, which was very neat.
Yeah.
It didn't take me terribly long to notice that, but I think this sequence is definitely why I disagree with you on George and Jessica being bland characters, because I think one of the things that this chapter goes to show is that when George and Jessica go and they kill Kyrie and Ava, and they have all of this discussion about their romantic lives or whatever, none of it really feels like a surprise or a cop-out or anything of the sort, because it's all kind of been established in the background with side dialogue. Like, they're not the main characters of the story, so of course they're not going to have as in-depth explanation of their romance as some of the other characters.
Right.
But still, when we get to episode 6 and look at their relationships and why they matter, you're not like, wait, what the fuck? Because we've still had that established in how they've been speaking earlier on.
Right, and I guess a little bit of it is I feel a little bit like they're really there for Shannon and Cannon, but when you do go into it, they have their own personality and characterization. I just really wish they could express that more, and I understand that there's a lot of characters, but let me be frank here. The fact that both Natsui and Eva got more fleshed out characterization than their children, when their children is supposed to be the new, the new like Satoshi or the new Mion and Shion.
Natsui is responsible for what happened to the man of 19 years ago.
Yeah, she's
and
pretty
Ava is the
important.
one that survived the game board. They're the more significant characters in the story. It's like watching or reading anything and complaining that the side characters don't get enough of a showing. They're side characters.
I
agree.
understand that.
I agree that it would have been awesome to get more detail on them, but I think of all of the characters that detail was cut from, those two are appropriately detailed for how they factor in at the story. The only character that really gets nothing in the story is Goda. And, I mean, it's pretty obvious
Goda
why
is the
he
comic
doesn't.
relief of the series.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my god, chapter 8
And
made me
here's the thing.
fucking
If
laugh.
you really want more Jessica story, there's always Jessica and the Killer Electric fan.
And I understand the manga's probably going a lot more detail, and I do like that, but I feel like there was a couple of just chunks missing, and
I don't agree.
you don't agree.
See, I have
you're
a-
entitled to your opinion, and I can understand the perspective that you
Knox
come
is
from.
ninth.
But I do think that they got an appropriate amount of detail for their role in the story.
For side characters, yes, I agree. But even in their main chapter, like chapter 2, chapter 6, I mean, it was mostly Beatrice in chapter 6, even still. Like, there's many times where they just popped back in to the, like, to the world of the lovers, and it's like, didn't like hours pass outside of the lovers world where Beatrice was just doing something, or Bottler or Narika were just doing
Yeah.
something, and now these people are just standing there? Like, did they just seriously just stand there for like hours or something?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I feel like a couple more scenes could have been introduced, but I guess that I guess it works out.
Yeah, I think, if anything, the fact that you want more detail for these characters speaks of how well they're written without that detail, because you still care enough for...
Yeah.
I want Jessica to get more screen time.
Yeah.
More so. I want to get the most as much as George. I think George was fine as he was. And it really leads you on to thinking, well, maybe he is the killer in the background, especially with things that he said, and that probably Jessica might be more of a victim of the sort. But I really wish that they would have been a little bit more fleshed out. Like, maybe spend, like, not Angie levels of detail, but like maybe
Yeah.
a little bit more. But, oh well, to the mangas.
Sabata, was there anything about episode 6 that particularly stood out to you?
I have a very weird opinion about episode 6.
Oh.
And that was just, I like the introduction of Zephyr and Furifuri. It sounds weird,
Hold on,
but
can you
I
say
like
that
their
again? I
introduction.
love your pronunciation.
I don't know how to, so please say how you'd pronounce it, actually.
Wait, what?
I have no idea how to
Zafar
pronounce
Say
it.
and
their names
Furfur.
again. Say the demons' names. I want to hear it again.
Zephyr and Furifuri.
Ooh, that's gorgeous.
I'm gonna take that.
You
You know,
by
I've
the way.
been quiet about some of our pronunciations, like Umineko, Ava, things like that. But Furifru, I never heard that.
That's
I called
fantastic.
him
No,
Furfur.
that's the official one. We're sticking with
No,
that.
I'm stealing that for sure.
Yes.
I will say, actually, I got so much flack for calling Kyrie Kyrie
Oh,
in the
God.
first episode.
I had such a temptation to do that. I had
Look,
such a
look,
temptation.
Look, until you called Tomataki Tommy Take throughout all 8 series of Higurashi, yeah, it's not as bad. Yes, I called Tomataki Tommy Take the whole fucking Higurashi Let's Play.
I feel like
And
I should do
then
that just as a joke when I get to
Hideyoshi
Higurashi.
throughout pretty much like two-thirds of Umineko. I called him Hideyoshi instead of Hideyoshi.
God forbid native English speakers mispronounce Japanese.
No, I wanted to say Kyrie so bad because I'm just used to that much more than
Yeah.
Kyrie.
I'm used to Kiri more. But anyway, Sabata, please.
Sorry, we were saying Sabata. You were talking about the demons.
I don't know. I mean, well, actually, you know what? I'm gonna go back on that pronunciation. I keep hearing you pronounce it as Beatrice. I swear, whenever I first started, I pronounced it that way. Ever since I heard Kinzo pronounce it as Beatrice, I cannot pronounce it
I
any
cannot
other
do
way.
I pronounce it that way when I'm trying to be over the top.
When
Yeah.
I hear Beatrice, I think, what's a twist? And it just ruins it for me.
Oh, Beatrice.
Oh, desire.
Oh my god. I think there was one time where some viewers actually asked me to kind of do a Kinzo impression screaming Beatrice, and I swear I scared my neighbor's dogs.
God, I would not want
yes.
to.
I feel like Kinzo is very much the easiest voice to pin in the series.
I mean,
Are
yeah,
you
you just had to
kidding? It's
yell.
one of the easiest voices to pull off.
It's very
Why
simple.
is he suddenly Dick Dastardly? That's what
I
I'm
don't know.
thinking. When
I
you
have
hear
no
it.
idea who
no
that
idea.
character is.
Me neither.
Let's stop tangenting. We're talking about demons.
Think Waluigi.
Yeah, we're talking
about love
yeah.
And
demons.
anyway, Sabata, like your opinion, like you were talking about Zafar and Furifru.
I don't know. I've heard some people didn't like their introductions, but I don't know what it is about their personalities, but Zephyr and Furifuri, yeah, keep laughing about my pronunciation.
Good though.
It's better than me. Go ahead.
I don't know what it is. Their personalities, I just thoroughly enjoyed any time that they actually got screen time throughout the visual novel.
fucking love them.
They're so
I
great.
usually only read red text and blue text and color text in general, but I stopped and read Zafar and Furfur's text. The only thing that I wish 07 would have done was make them rhyme. That was my one wish, was to make them rhyme.
That would have
I
been
can
that would have been
imagine
great.
those two rhyming.
Because the thing is Magus and I each did one of their voices, so when they both spoke at the same
God.
time, we got into the habit of trying to sync it up without actually having to count it in.
Oh my
And
god.
it was so much
Oh,
fun.
wow.
We tried to do our best Drew Carey impressions for them, and it did not go well, but it was so much fun.
And then you
think
find
one of
out
them-
one of them has a dick.
Oh, yeah.
That
Well,
was
not
fun.
necessarily. I think the main thing, especially that episode 7 kind of says about them, in regards to Leon, is that they are more embodiments of how the culprit feels about themselves.
Kind of like an embodiment of their sort of a gender identity.
It really is the
Mhm.
embodiment of quote-unquote gender.
Yeah, if you look at the tip,
Right.
it doesn't say which gender either of them is. It just says that they're the opposite of each other.
Yeah.
So it's left up to your interpretation to figure out which one is which.
I don't know. I don't even think that's it. I think the point is that they are embodiments of, like, a contradiction in the culprit, in that they want to be free of a genderless, of a gendered identity.
Kind of like a misidentified culprit where people say it was a guy and then it turns out to be a girl or vice versa.
See, the way I saw
Yeah.
it was more of that it was intentionally ambiguous to show the conflicted nature of the culprit and what they've been dealing
that's kind
with.
of what I was getting at.
Although it is hilarious in Golden Fantasia when you go to multiplayer and you hear both of their voices, and you just hear a very deep. I think it's Zafar actually. That's the deep
It could
guy.
be the other
Yeah.
one.
I
The
mean,
one with blue
but the thing
hair.
is for
It
that
is
they had to kind of get a
hilarious.
voice actor,
Yeah.
and they made a choice there. If I was doing a professional voice acting thing for Zephyrin, I would have kind of tried to go for a very much more gender neutral voice because I feel like that's the point of them.
Hmm.
Either gender neutral or very feminine and very masculine.
I'm surprised they
at
didn't
the
have
same
just
time.
like the same voice
so
actor.
basically like this when you're speaking as them.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
I mean that would be if we were doing it professionally, but because we're not doing it professionally, we did Drew Carey.
Have you seen our Let's Plays? Professionalism is not one of our strong
Yeah.
suits.
Oh my god, that first episode of Umineko, my voice for Hideyoshi, good lord.
I think speaking of the culprit's identity, the other thing that we get into in episode 6 is the two Beatrices,
Mhm.
and kind of that story of how the culprit got their identity. Especially if you go back and rewatch episode 6 after reading episode 7, the entire journey between older and younger Beatrice is basically a fantastical retelling of how the culprit came to develop that identity. Like
Yeah.
blending the mysteries and folklore of the island with their own personality until they kind of came up with this magical character.
For me, at least on 6, it was my favorite by far, just because of how Erica went around her detective's authority and how she kind of just passed that off. Because I even said, like, the one way to guarantee a corpse is, dead, you just kill them yourself. And
Yeah, you
perform an
and I
autopsy.
had different cases there where she said she was throwing away the detective's authority, and I was like, cool, she's the culprit. Whereas you were like, well, she doesn't have the detective's authority, so the only way she can confirm things is if she kills them herself. So we both got to the same
Yeah.
conclusion in very different ways.
I mean,
you
we
were just
did.
like, oh well, she's the culprit. I was like, oh, she's just gonna handicap
Well,
herself
because
the whole
that is
time.
the only restriction that the detective's authority gives you.
I wasn't
Mhm.
thinking about that. I was thinking, oh, she's just gonna handicap herself just to basically
No,
teabag the
she's-
shit out of Butler.
She's awful. She
There
goes
is
for the
only
kill.
one thing that you cannot do with the detective's authority, and that is kill.
Mhm.
Right, but then when it got to Kiri cannot replace Butler and all of them, and it turned out that they brought that up, I was like, oh my god, wait, what? And
I am so
I
excited.
completely forgot about that.
I'm so excited to actually go through and edit that part of episode 6 because it was one of my favorite parts to read. Because the moment it was like, Kyrie comes down the corridor, I was like, oh no, he's fucked up. He's screwed.
Yeah. I thought that as well.
Cannot save Butler. What do you mean Kiri can't save Butler?
Yeah, that was
Oh,
such a...
she's fucking dead.
Yeah, as soon as that popped up, it just kind of dawned on me.
I didn't realize what it was until she's outright said, and I'm pretty
think
slow on some of these.
It's obviously meant to be a surprise, but even having figured out exactly what was going on, it was still a fantastic moment, and I think it speaks volumes for how well episode 6 is written.
and then
for sure.
and then the stinger of her saying, "Oh, and I can say this too in red. They were all very much alive." Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I thought, because originally I thought, wait a minute, Butler killed his own character. Does that mean Butler has because they mentioned that magic can only do so much that the witch, the controller, is willing to do. That made me think Butler's willing to kill himself. But then when I found out it was a prank and Enrique literally
here's the
killed
thing, though.
everyone.
Do you think the logic error was intentional?
Oh, for sure. 100% it was
Yeah,
intentional.
definitely.
Really, I did not. I think he just fucked up.
No, because he went so long without having Canon come and get him out. That's why I think it was completely intentional.
Yeah, no,
to
I think it
avoid
was
him.
on purpose.
Really, I did not think about that.
It took me a little while to agree with it, but as far as we've been shown, the game master should know what's happening to the pieces on the board.
And the
Mhm.
game master obviously knows who the culprit is. That's one of the prerequisites.
Well, not even that. He would know that he
Right.
died.
Yeah, plus the other thing is if the story is being written from like an authorship theory perspective, then clearly the author knew what was going on. So it was obviously a setup to try and like cloak but also reveal the identity of Beatrice. So I think it was completely on purpose from
Mhm.
any
Right.
angle that you look at it.
So, should we talk about the one thing throughout the entire series that tortured me up until chapter 7? And that was the thumbnail of chapter 7 had a very cool looking, almost Simon Belmont looking guy. And I knew about that since like chapter 1, and finally, Willard H. Wright was introduced into the story, and it made my day. He's like one of the better characters, in my opinion.
Oh, by far.
I was really glad to finally have Van Dyne appear in the story. One of the guys that I was talking through as I was reading through it, Vice Golbez, they thought that Berncastle was going to introduce Van Dyne as a way to fuck with all of the rules of the game board, because if you actually look at Van Dyne's rules, Ryukishi breaks so many of them.
Oh yeah, it's way tighter than
one of them
Noct.
specifically was you cannot identify the culprit from the brand of cigarette, which is
Yeah,
like play by play
exactly what happens.
in
It's
chapter
just
3.
straight up what happens.
Right.
Well, even when he
but-
drops the servant thing as well, like that's immediately supposed to
Yeah.
like kind of throw you off. But if you realize that they've already solved the epitaph, you can get around that pretty easily.
Yeah, I think
even then,
actually
when you-
retrospectively, there are a lot of Van Dyne rules that on the surface seem to be broken, but aren't literally.
Mm-hmm. I think if you sat down and actually thought a way out, that you could get a way out.
But god damn, he looked really cool. Like when I thought witch hunter, I was like, this is someone whose job it is to hunt witches. And I was fucking right. Court of Heaven.
I feel like he was kind of a quintessentially edgy looking character.
Yeah, kind
Like,
of.
His
Pretty
outfit
much.
almost was a bit tropey to me, but I thought that they very much sold how his character actually carried themselves in the story really well.
It's a play on the detective having a large overcoat sort of thing that Sherlock
little bit.
Holmes made popular. But actually getting into the detail of chapter 7, this is when the epitaph was solved for me.
This is when
and
everything's
a couple
solved.
of other things. Yeah, pretty much everything else was solved. This was like, a lot of people warned me, like, if you have any lingering, like, theories, you gotta get them done before chapter 7. Because chapter 7 just pretty much told you what was going on.
Yeah.
One of the things from, like, the magical perspective that I didn't, that like relates to the multi-personality theory is that Willard, for all the intents and purposes, is the detective in this chapter, which is why he cannot see, if we go off of, if you believe in the Psychiatrist theory, like, I think we all believe in Psychiatrists.
I'm pretty sure we all believe in that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
I mean-
sorry to all of you people who don't believe in Psychiatrists and think of other
We can talk
things.
about that in a bit.
I'll have a
But
video on that myself.
if you believe in
personally.
Psychiatrists, it makes sense why Willard cannot see Kenan and Shannon together. And it also harkens back to in chapter 1 through 4, Butler never sees Kenan and Shannon in the same room.
Well, after the
which-
first episode.
Well, yeah. No,
No, he
doesn't
sees it in the
see
first
them?
episode.
Really? I forgot
Yep.
about that. Huh.
It was in the very beginning.
Shit, I should have paid attention to that.
I don't remember the exact point,
I
but
need
it
to
did
go
happen
back
at
through.
one point.
I don't
But-
think so.
I'm fairly
I mean, I
certain.
know that he sees them in the meta world together, like in the Tea Party. That I remember. Anyways,
I'm pretty sure
chapter-
the first time they appear together is the beginning of episode 5.
But Butler was no longer the detective.
Yes, which is why it's allowed
Which
to happen.
makes me think, what the hell was Eureka looking at when people were referring to Kenan and Shannon?
I'll tell you what I think about that. I'm pretty sure that Erica, because we're not seeing things from Erica's perspective.
Mhm, we're seeing it from Battlers.
They pull a Higurashi and change our perspectives.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that basically Erica perceived one of them, because if you actually look at the conversation, every time she speaks directly, I'm pretty sure she speaks to Shannon, and every other time that Shannon and Cannon have dialogue, they both speak like together, and they're both in the same space, and their actions are both inconsequentially the same, such
Right.
as in when they're over in the dining hall on the first night, when the first Twilight happens, they're both together. Like, that's their
Oh my
alibi.
god, that dining hall fucked with Newt for the longest time, if I remember.
Oh no, it was just it was not the letter, it was the knock on the door. That pissed me off for no end
Knock
at all.
on the door. I basically just gave up and said, well, Eureka, who was the detective, never heard the knock herself. She only heard people talking about it, so fuck it. But okay, so actually
Yeah.
going into chapter,
Well, that was the funny thing, is that Erica had that whole scene where she freaks out and figures it out, and then everyone's like, "Yeah, that's obviously what happened." I thought that was really
no, it was
fantastic.
pissing me off because I was waiting for something and it was just absolutely throwing me everything because I just ended up saying, "Oh, you just lean through the window, throw the letter to the door, and then you get a long stick."
You just pull like a Buster Keaton. You're like cleaning the glass and lean through it. And
No, I
clean it
seriously
on the
did.
other side.
Like someone just
But,
leaned through a window, tossed the letter all the way to the door, and ended up hitting the door, landing perfectly. And then they said it was
the
just
knock.
standing
It
there.
was obviously
The
what
Nog
happened.
fucked with that.
No, it
Anyhow.
was a good theory.
I think definitely the strongest part of episode 7 for me was the fact that it gives you all of the answers without giving you the answers.
Mhm.
Exactly. Because, I cannot believe I missed his name. He's basically my 07 Willard. Willard.
There you go.
Willard, in a way, speaks either gold or red or blue. Either I like to think gold. Basically, gold truths his way throughout that entire battle at the end, but he never says it in order to respect Beatrice's game board and say, "Hey, I'm gonna solve this mystery because I need to." But I'm not going to announce it. It's not my job
I
to.
mean, as far as I'm concerned, Willard is a magical recreation of Battler.
Yeah, I can see that.
I can see that.
He's a competent battler.
The whole love story between Leon and Willard is just Battler and Beatrice.
It really
Like,
is.
that's just what that is.
And the whole relationship between Willard and Leon is just it makes sense on that perspective.
Yeah. The other thing is the end scene in episode 7's Tea Party where Willard and Leon escape through the ocean. That's just the end of episode 8, just in a magical recreation.
Oh yeah, looking back on it, it really is.
Right.
There are actually a lot of scenes, and I'll get to this later, but there are a lot of scenes that foreshadow the end of episode 8. I was like emotionally drained when I saw that happen.
Going through chapter 8 was
7.
yes. 7. Going through chapter 7, learning about the past, before the events of Rokenjima was a nice change of pace, because the only time we actually got outside of Rokenjima was
Angie.
Angie. Right, but now we got the perspective of characters outside of this time period, like Kinzo. We get the introduction of Beatrice the First, Beatrice the Second, and then eventually Beatrice the Third. Kinzo's fucked up, but just the fact that we go through Japanese military and everything, and then eventually get towards solving the epitaph, you really learn a lot about Kinzo's past, and it really shapes Kinzo's character, which honestly, the enigma of Kinzo not actually being there the whole time, it really tells a story about who he was.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things to me is I wrote up a lot of theories about how Kinzo had acquired the island and his military history, and what I thought mostly ended up being close to the truth, but I really was not expecting to actually get shown it. I was not expecting to get that answer about Kinzo's past as clearly as we did, and I thought that it was done in a very humanizing way for his character.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, it certainly helped me understand him.
Right, but something that bothered me about that is you hear all the time about soldiers that are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and as a member of the Japanese military that saw a bunch of his friends, coworkers, everyone basically die, to Italian, gunfire as well as mutiny, perfect place to raise your children. Because fuck the Night Terrors. You are literally living on the place that a lot of your fucking soldier friends died.
At the end of episode 7, we get that whole flash where it shows us the non-magically obstructed events where it was Kinzo that actually started the gunfight below the island, supposedly.
Really?
Yeah, because you remember that flash where there's the red covering over the screen and the culprit's like, why can't I love anymore? And then there was Kinzo's captain saying what the hell are you talking about, Ashirami? What do you mean attack the Italians? As far as I'm concerned, I think it was actually Kinzo that planned that attack to get the gold, and then
but
what
even
we see...
still, my thought was, if I was thinking one place to live after going through fucking World War II, would not be the same fucking place that I was stationed at, where a lot of fucking other soldiers died. But fuck it, Kinzo's crazy.
I mean, if I had like fucking 100 tons of gold, I'd be just staying there or whatever. I mean, come on, you're not gonna move it anytime.
True.
I mean, fuck that. That's so much money, and someone's gonna steal it. Obviously, the whole point was also that I don't think he cared about any of the soldiers there at all, because he was already on the...
So what we've learned today is that if Newt invites you to a private island, you shouldn't go.
Only if there's gold involved.
But, God, like, Chapter 7 was just something. And then the epitaph. Oh, God. That was 3 days of hell for me. So, unlike Newt and Chikono, and I don't know how you solved the epitaph, Sabata.
I didn't.
But you didn't?
I couldn't. I was trying, and I was constantly told that, well, you
Really?
need some knowledge on Japanese, and I was just kind of stuck like, what the hell am I doing?
No, it's really
Let
hard.
me tell you, I had to translate and retranslate over and over.
See, that's where you
It
went
was-
wrong. That's your fault.
Yeah,
That's the
no,
problem.
I made a whole video on what I did, but God.
I think definitely this wave of people playing through Umineko have definitely disproved that you need to know Japanese.
Oh, no,
Anyone
you
who
definitely
fucking
don't
tells you
at
that you
all.
need Japanese to solve the epitaph is talking shit.
Mhm.
You went through and solved it because you knew war history. I went through and solved it by literally taking fucking leaps around, talking about train stations. Like, there are entire steps of the epitaph that I skipped, which was arguably easier in English because there wasn't any, like, match the boxes for the mouth character.
Oh, yeah, like that kind of stuff, it makes it harder.
I used translation I started from fucking Najima because it was close to where he was stationed on Rokenjima, went up, found a place that had the word village in it, then equated everything to rivers to trains, and then fucking looked for freshwater train, and then I somehow got in fucking Taiwan, and then by that point I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Like, I think, if anything, I would argue the case that English speakers are at an advantage as long as they're open to thinking abstractly about the
Oh, for
epitaph.
sure.
Right, because Japanese viewers have to go through, like, what the fuck does this even mean?
Because they have to actually translate it to, like, Chinese, because it's not actually in Japanese, the original text of it. You have to change it into Chinese to actually get what the actual word is. At least that's what I found.
And that's always fun.
Or at least
Well,
from
shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know necessarily
much
about
work.
the specifics of that, but there definitely is, like, a whole bunch of physical play with the characters that has to be done for Japanese, whereas in English, if you just match the concepts up, you can get close enough.
And
Like,
then
that's how I
even
did it.
then, when I got everything done and I was like at the epitaph itself, like I didn't know what the fuck they were meaning. It took help from a lot of other people, just pushing me in the right direction, that I realized, oh, you just take the epitaph literally and just, like, the answer is nothing. I found that to be interesting in a way, like, sort of a symbolic representation when the answer's nothing, that it's the journey that was the goal the whole time, and that's what
It's
I
all
got
about
out of
the
it.
journey.
It's
Yeah.
all about the journey, although fuck this puzzle.
No, see, there was actually
Yeah.
another thing I found out through doing it is Rosa's hint in episode 5 with going down from each point is like a stop. If you actually go back the entire rail line, you can count 10 and it'll actually just give you this rail station there. Because I ended up going back and looking at it and it actually just puts you
Didn't know
right
that.
there. No, it's hilarious because if you start from the very beginning and just count 10 right there, both ways.
And then the quadrillion, I fucking, like, went through all of not all of chapter 4, but I was digging through chapter 4 until I saw the phrase, you'll find this door at a quadrillion to 1, and then I took Quill and I was like, oh shit, that's the keyhole. That's the fucking keyhole.
That's when I waited
It's
to
funny,
do
the
my
moment
video.
I heard quadrillion, my first thought was Kuadorian, just because of the pronunciation.
Well, it is pretty
Really?
similar.
I mean, I actually went from the ground, like, I went from the back forwards. I was like, well, where is the gold most likely to be? The chapel. Oh yeah, there was that sign out front of the chapel.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of started actually knowing what I was looking to fit into, which was quadrillion.
I didn't think the chapel because, the way that I interpreted where the gold was, it was in an underground mine shaft, and I was like, the fuck kind of place is the underground mine
The thing
shaft?
that gave the chapel away for me was the whole thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's a chapel for a man that is very clearly not positively religious,
Yeah,
and
no one
also
goes in
he
there.
never wanted his
and
children
now
to go
that I
there.
look back at it, the fact that he always got mad when his children went by it, like that should have been, big red flag for me, but of course
Yeah.
it wasn't.
No, I figured it was there as well. I just felt like I needed to find that place first.
Yeah, you just wanted the solid evidence, which was like fair enough. I kind of took a bit of a risk and it paid off, but I can understand waiting for the definite answers.
No, I don't want to have a correction. That's what I was really wanting to avoid. I just wanted to state my answer and I never have to change it ever again. And once Angie said, oh, what's this say? And it said quadrillion, that's when I immediately just made my video because I already had my place lined out. I just wanted to see what the word was.
I think the other thing about the epitaph sequence in episode 7 that I really enjoyed was looking at the magical versus real interpretations of it. So like when Seo goes and like throws the book down on the floor and it just happens to open to the right page, like of course that didn't happen. That's bullshit. And
Well, of
there's
course.
that whole thing where the culprit's obviously like writing about how things have happened and their interpretation of solving the epitaph as being magical. And then when we get to Kinzo's study at the end and they're like, "Oh, yeah, cool, father," and then Kinzo dies. then again-
right.
Oh, that is sad.
All right, you're my daughter. We finally connected after all these years. All right, peace, deuces.
Then there's that whole sequence at the end of episode 7 with the flashes of red where you see the culprit actually like fucking flipped out when they were there. Right?
Well, of
And
course.
it very much goes to show that the culprit's diary is still showing their like interpretation of the world.
I don't remember flashes of red.
It was really quick.
It was very brief.
Yeah, it was like a super quick sequence. It was like maybe 3 panels.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are gonna have to like link me pictures of it, but like I gotta try and find that because I'd assume it's in the original version because I played the original.
Oh, no, it probably is.
I know after that, I remember after that brief flash of red, I remember somebody sent me a link to, I know you guys have probably heard of him, Goldsmith. He made a video about that instant. After seeing that video, I didn't realize that, I should have realized that was actually part of the manga, because I haven't read the manga yet. But it showed the manga version of that scene, and I remember witnessing that, and it just got worse. It kind of confirmed some of my original theories about the culprit. But it was kind of hard to sit through. Like, the manga does a good job, I think, showing it. But it was kind of heart-wrenching.
No, I've been avoiding actually just getting all those answers because I don't actually want to see it. Like, I'm good with just the explanation of 7. I've avoided every single, here's the answer. Here's confessions. I don't want to get to that. It's just, I want to keep it just in the cat box and just leave it there instead of actually just reopening that wound and just tearing it open.
I'm thinking about watching it myself just to like confirm some things.
No, I don't want
honestly.
it at all.
Yeah, and that's your choice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go into that. Like, at least if I decide to watch it, it's gonna be after Golden Fantasia. Like, I'm gonna wait until Golden Fantasia's done before I make that decision.
God, making me feel bad that I watched that. Ouch.
I think mainly the thing for me, I very much agree with Newt, where I like that there are answers out there for people that want them, but I think that accepting those answers as 100% gospel is kind of defeating the purpose of some of the things that the story tries to teach you.
Well, especially from episode 8.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Accepting Psyotris as 100% gospel is probably the same. Like, who says that it's actually supposed to be that case?
Fair point.
Well, the whole thing is balancing between, magic, truth, and all of that stuff. The whole point is everything about this story is really ambiguous. So to say that, this is 100% what happened, it's already going against what the whole point of this story is.
I think that the story very much goes to demonstrate that you should be allowed to have multiple interpretations. So people saying like, oh, your answers don't match the manga is kind of a bit of a moot point because the story tells you that doesn't matter.
It really doesn't.
Well, I know that, but like I said, my interpretation of the story itself is I kind of agree that it's a cat box that should be closed forever, kind of. Because what I take from Umineko, despite seeing some of the stuff that was shown to me or some of the stuff that I theorized, I think Umineko is one of those stories where it doesn't need to have a concrete answer.
Right, and I feel like going from Higurashi, Higurashi, you can look at many different interpretations, but Higurashi had a very open and closed story. Like, you got to the
I'm
end
still
of
kind of going through
Higurashi,
it
and it was
myself.
like, this is the villain. This is what happened. All
Well,
of
it's
this
not a
happened.
mystery though. That's the whole point. It's not a mystery.
It's not as much as a mystery. It's more of a Japanese creepy fest rather than traditional mystery. But then you get to Umineko, and it's completely different. Umineko's
Right.
like,
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ryukashi went on record with an interview just after episode 8 came out, saying that if you had read Higurashi first, you might find it harder to solve Umineko,
Really?
because you'd be expecting the same things when they're
yeah.
actually very different at their core.
Oh, if anything, it made it easier for me because I was looking for really, really obscure things when it wasn't actually as obscure as I was thinking.
Well, I think it's not about like looking for clues. It's more that the motive of the story for
Oh, yeah, that's
Higurashi
different.
versus Umineko was very different.
yeah, and that is something that actually tripped me up too. Was that Higurashi had a clean ending? This one's ending. I guess we should just get into chapter 8 since we're dancing around the ending so much. This game's ending was something.
It was
But
fantastic.
going into chapter 8, let's just get this out of the way. Tiny Angie was the most adorable thing I've ever seen.
God, I wanted to carry her
100%
around so
agreed on
bad.
Oh yeah,
Tiny
that
Tiny
scene
Angie.
in the episode 7 question mark tea party was such a fantastic setup.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And then chapter 8, there's like the tiny. I actually had a problem, and I called myself out. I could not stop saying Tiny Angie whenever that sprite was on picture. And then when I saw the Steam and the PS3 version, it was just like that is so adorable.
No, little Angie's
But,
just adorable.
Gushing about the Happy Meal kids menu. Sorry, I like referencing hamburgers a lot. Gushing about that side, I feel like there could have been a lot more lighthearted moments in chapter 8, especially with the introduction of
You thought there could have been more?
I wanted just it lighthearted, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it was
Yes,
just so
more.
much depression up to that point. It's just, I just wanted these people to live. I don't want any suffering at this point. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I enjoyed all of the happy moments that were like in the episode 8. I enjoyed them wholeheartedly, and I did wish that there would be a little bit more. But then again, I'm kind of hopeless. I like happy moments like that amidst despair.
I guess I'm a little bit used to Higurashi in that there was the happy nice club activities, and then there was sad depression, and then happy club activities. It was a roller coaster. It brought me back to Higurashi, where I got to enjoy a little bit of nice rest and just everyone being happy. Before 07, you fucked everything up and made everything terrible again, because he likes to abuse his readers like that.
What do you guys think about Battler's telling of how the family really was? Do you believe that Kinzo was actually friendly grandpa?
Who's to know? I mean, who's to say that he isn't, though? That's the whole point, I guess.
He was not a good father.
Here's the thing, though. Regardless of what you think the truth is, what do you believe?
He was not a good father, but I know that grandparents like to spoil their grandchildren and they're more harsh on their own children. I understand that. But I don't know, in the way that it was presented, and the fact that Butler said, "Yeah, this is an outright fallacy," I probably think that Kinzo.
But he said that the specific details were a fallacy, but he never said that he pretty much stated that is how Kinzo behaves. Like, of all of the lies he was telling, he said that Kinzo was like the one thing that
Look, Butler was
actually
gone
the
for
case.
6 years. Kinzo could have fucking snapped and became a grumpy old bastard.
On
for
his
all we
deathbed,
knew.
though, that's where it gets different because he's already resigned to the fact that he's not going to live another year. Theoretically speaking, if he gets to that point, why wouldn't he be as nice as he is? What's the point of being like
Yeah,
a
I mean,
dick to
here's
everyone?
the thing for me is regardless of what the truth was, I choose to believe the fact that Kinzo was the way that Battler presents him in episode 8.
I like to believe that too.
Wasn't it also stated earlier in the series that pieces can't act out of turn? Like, they can't do something that they wouldn't do?
I think it was more that they couldn't do things that were impossible for them. Like, people can still have mood swings and be grumpy.
Mhm.
Okay, okay.
And
You can't you can't tell the Rosa piece to summon giant castles like you can with the Virgilia piece.
You probably could, really.
Okay, fair enough.
I think it was
I
more
mean,
of
if you
like,
want to go into Rosatris theory, then yeah, but they can't do
I've gotten
anything that's...
shit about that.
They can't... That's a whole other thing we gotta get into.
Well, you can talk about that
We'll
later.
talk about that later. But, like,
Definitely.
I don't know, like, it was nice, but I agree a little bit with Angie. Like, this is a fallacy.
This is weird.
But I think Baller was trying to teach her something, and he was. He was.
I think the funny thing to me about that entire sequence is how reasonable Amakusa was being in the cutaway flash forwards.
Mm-hmm.
Amakusa's like, don't be like the child soldier. Don't forget your original goals or whatever.
mm-hmm.
And like Amakusa's this fucking goofy kid with a terrible outfit and a crazy
But he did
attitude.
offer some good advice on that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is like it was very much Amakusa was offering advice that made a lot of sense and was then reflected in the story. Then what about the puzzles for you guys? I mean,
No, fuck George.
I barely fucked it all up.
I apparently solved them the wrong way.
regardless of how you guys did with the puzzles, how did you feel about their involvement in the story?
Oh, it was perfect. I thought the way
I
they were
enjoyed 'em.
introduced was really well done because it each gave each part of the family a part.
You know, this isn't the first time that this has happened, but it was one of those things where Chapter 8 kept on dropping hints of choice, and decision. And
I mean, it straight up said it
Yeah.
in like the text on the menu before you selected the episode.
it straight up says it. So when 07 gave me control of these small little puzzles, I was like, fuck. I'm gonna have to... There are multiple endings for this game, and I'm gonna fuck everything up. And so
Choices in
the
my
puzzles
novel?
made
What
me
the hell?
nervous. I thought the puzzles... You know what? They're not my proudest moment. They were probably the cringiest part of my Let's Play, because I fucked them up.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a real editing challenge with mine just because I took so long on a lot of them.
I think the entirety for me was like 2 hours for all of them because I solved almost all of them quickly. I think the longest I took was 10 minutes at most, which was either Shannon or Cannon's. It really didn't take me long because most of the questions they asked ended up having knowledge that I've had. So I was really fortunate in that regard.
I just got him right through bull BS luck.
The other thing is the scenes that played after each group of puzzles.
Oh my god, yeah.
Were actually locked to if you got the puzzles right.
Mhm.
I had no idea about that.
Which is an interesting game design choice to me.
Going into that, like in like finding out that Kiri was actually Bottler's mother the whole time made sense for why he looks a lot like Angie.
Yeah.
Finding out a couple of other things like the relationship that Eva had with Angie, like all the small little things, it really made that chapter wonderful. But having them locked, I mean, yeah, you could just cheat the system, but I thought 07 was going to punish me.
Yeah, you can still go back and see them if you just look it up and get it right. Chrono Trigger, the head translator for Manga Gamer, basically made the point that what else was he going to do? If he's adding a game mechanic, there needs to be a reward. And it makes sense that in a novel, you would make the reward a bit of story.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with it because you don't technically lose anything if you don't get it. You just get some extra details. I had no problem with it. Well, that's also because I got most of them right as well, so.
Yeah, fuck you.
I think I actually got all of them right, but then again, that was through BS luck.
I had to go.
Yeah,
I had to go back. I had to go back and actually get them all right just to show off the extra dialogue. But I didn't know that I got a prize at the end. So canonically speaking, my Let's Play, I got the manufactured doll. But from what I actually heard, thanks to a fan, I'm sure a lot of you guys know him, like Silvercover. He mentioned to me that if you were to cheat and hack the game and get more than the amount allowable, you would actually unlock Tomataki from Higurashi.
Yep, they gave me that.
It's a
For
fun
some
trick.
reason, some people really wanted me to do that, so they gave me a save file and said, "Do it this way. You will like the prize." And I'm like, "Okay." So I ended up doing it that way.
I would have done it if I knew where my save files were, because fucking Windows 10 is like that. But
Well, the reason I did it was mostly because apparently I got all of the quiz answers right, and they said, "Here, go ahead and try this since you got them all right,"
Right.
despite doing it the wrong way.
And one of the things I thought of going, because I actually picked the trick ending first. I'm thinking back to the fact that she threw the doll off the ship. I'm wondering what would happen if I had Tomataki. Would Tomataki just been thrown off
Well, yeah,
the ship?
that was the whole gimmick,
Yeah,
right?
she still throws it out.
No, see, the funny thing for me, at least, with when she says, like, oh, what are those? Like, oh, those are my regrets. I said the exact same line when she did that because I only got the last one wrong because I overthought it one extra step. So it was entirely my regrets, as we both say it at the exact same time. It was just hilarious.
I got a lot of
That's
them
pretty
wrong,
great.
but I got Maria's right, like, instantly.
Yeah, I spotted Maria's instantly, but then spent like 20 minutes trying to figure it out anyway. Just for my own
I
amusement.
spotted Maria's. I pseudo spotted Maria's instantly, but then I spent a little bit like logicking it out, like reasoning myself, like, okay, I got like based on this, it's this. I know it's this, but here's why.
See, I felt the real puzzle was Burns' whole thing. I felt that was the fun part.
Oh,
Hell yeah.
let's talk about
my
that.
God.
Okay, so first off, Higurashi did this, but I don't know how I feel about the game literally stopping you until you get this right.
Oh, I love it. I love it every single time.
I know some people that outright fucking hate it. I mixed on it.
Umineko very much wants you to be an active reader and look at the hints and try figure it out, and it rewards you so much if you do so. So I can understand for the people that aren't reading through that way that Burns' game can be really frustrating, but it's not like it's impossible. The hints basically tell you the answer if you read through all of them. And for the active readers who have been paying attention and know how the tricks work, it's just a good bit of fun. So I think it's actually a really great part of it.
It was really fun, but you know.
Oh yeah.
But then the actual ending of that too, like why did I not see that coming? Like of all things, it should have been like.
Of course, it had to be.
It had
couldn't
to
have
be.
been
That's
anything else.
Like, I was thinking that, but I didn't want to use that logic.
Honestly speaking, if you actually take the time and think about it, like Angie's in this world. Let's see, what is the worst outcome? Well, that's probably the worst outcome. I could have just guessed that and been like, oh, well, I guess Vern was just being a dick today.
See, I would feel like that's just a cheap way to solve it, which is why I didn't want to use that logic and actually just work through it logically and cross people off.
What I did was I used certain things, but I forgot about other things, so it was tooth and nail for me. But, like, I was thinking, you know, if Nanjo's the culprit, then, you know, he's the culprit. If he's not, then it proves that other people can make assumptions about characters and be correct. And so I proved that. And it's like, okay, based on that, Butler has to be the culprit because Maria and George cancel each other out. And then when Butler alone wasn't the culprit, I was like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
It took me a while.
I think one of the funny things for me about Burns' game is that I solved Burns' game in about 60 seconds, but then I took like 3 hours on all of the earlier puzzles, and I think that speaks a lot about how I was playing the game, because my head was very much in the mindset of solving mysteries, not like the gimmicky puzzles.
Fuck you too.
No, it was so much fun.
It took me.
Yeah, no, I thought it was
took me
fantastic.
3 episodes to do it.
God, I think it was 30 minutes in total for logicking everything out, I want to say.
Oh,
Maybe
mine
40.
was an hour because I do 20
Mine
minutes
was an
each.
accident.
Mine was a full hour. Figure it out.
Did you guys see the purple statements? Truth?
Yeah.
Can't remember which
Oh,
it
yeah.
was.
Yeah.
I guess
Did you
purple
see them?
statements.
Did you see them coming?
I felt something similar was going to come up at some point.
No. Okay. So I've been seeing a lot of memes all around about pink text, green text. I never saw anything about purple text. So when purple text just came in without any sound effect too, it was just like, oh, okay, I guess we're just gonna deal with this shit now.
Yeah, I'd kind of reasoned out what the purple text was going to be before it actually appeared, so I kind of went in with a bit of an advantage there.
Now, I want to imagine the entire Umineko series with violet instead of red.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord.
That's called Umineko hard mode.
No, that's unfair, actually, because there's just no
That is
grounding
unfair.
that you can hold, especially if it takes away all the narration and just
Mhm.
and there's no first person at all. That's when it gets hard.
No, you literally just change the red text to violet.
Listen, if you want to do that, Fox, I would read it.
It would be.
The mod.
I'm not doing that work. I'm not doing that work.
Also known as the fuck you
It'll
mod.
take years.
Actually, it'd be interesting if that's what When They Cry 5 ends up being.
Oh god.
Like
Oh,
an
God.
entirely purple text-based game. So the next big sequence through episode 8 is the battle for the Golden Land and the whole thing with
Oh
the
my
Book
God.
of the Certain Truth or whatever.
Okay,
part.
I played the original version, and there are a couple things that I'm sad about the original version. Not having the pirate hat was one of them.
Yeah.
Sucks to
The
suck.
pirate hat was essential.
Oh, it's the
The
best.
pi-
Yeah,
I
there you
wish
go.
I had the pirate.
Fantastic.
I did not get Willard's sword, nor did I get Pirate Hat Eureka.
No,
And I
Pirate
was
Hat
really
Erica is
sad
best.
about not getting Pirate Hat Eureka, but
That made the chapter.
That's definitely one of the advantages of the Steam version. You kind of get a bit of the best of both worlds.
Oh, Steam version has Pirate Hat?
Yeah,
Huh.
she was supposed to. I mean, he even mentioned it.
Yeah, shout out to Asagi Tempura who did the sprites for the Steam version and the fantastic pirate hat.
I mean, that's what sells the whole thing, right?
I think the main thing for me about the Battle for the Golden Land is it just went on for a really, really long time.
But it went back and forth. One of my favorite portions was the battle between Angie and Beatrice while the battle between Erika and Butler was going on. Because first of all, Guitar Shred is the best thing in music ever.
I disagree.
Really?
Birth of a New Witch is definitely the best soundtrack.
Move on. Let's not argue about that now.
No, I'm talking. No, not that soundtrack. I mean, the best thing in music is the Guitar Shred.
No.
Whatever. And anyways, going into that, that was one of my favorite portions, other than the battle between Byrne and
That was
Delta.
my favorite part of the Battle for the Golden Land. I think the thing that was really weak about the Battle for the Golden Land for me was just that it went on for so long that it kind of was like, can we just get to the end? Because there was this whole sequence where they're in the staircase of the mansion, and it's like, the goats are coming, and the goats don't believe in magic, so they can't be dealt with by these people. But these ones don't believe in mystery, so they could be dealt with by these people. And it just was like, okay, Ryukishi, we get it. The goats can only interact with certain
We get
characters.
it. The goats are a euphemism for every single person that's read your fucking books.
Yeah, I thought that it was a really fantastic sequence, but I would have much rather just had it animated than have to read it line after line.
Which reminds me, why the fuck is this not an anime?
Because they flopped.
Yeah, if only Umineko had a proper anime, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
Right. I still have not watched Chapter 4.
Oh boy, it's bad. Yeah,
I
it's
haven't
bad.
watched any of it, so I win.
Yes, you
I-
do.
I-
win. Continue not watching.
I'm not.
Continue not.
I'm busy. I have so many shit I have to get to. God, I can't just spend time watching it.
The other thing about episode 8, in that sequence was the Book of Certain
Mhm.
Truth. I think, in my opinion, the Book of Certain Truth probably contained the end of episode 7. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I like that the Book of Certain Truth exists, but I feel like it was one of those things where so much regret was made after reading that. It was one of the things where I wanted to stop Angie so bad, but it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I can't stop her. She's
Yeah.
so into
Yeah.
this. She knows that this is bad, but she's doing this. So, you know what? Fine. If the game has a split ending where I have to make a choice, it's a more dilemma for me. But
Yeah.
the Book of the Single Truth, I feel like it was just arbitrarily introduced in Chapter 8. There was no mention throughout any of Chapter 1 or 2 or whatever of Eva having a book and writing a diary. The closest we got, was Chapter 5 when it came to Natsui's diary.
Well, I think episode 7's Tea Party kind of sets up that Ava had the truth because Ava, Beatrice's catchphrase and laugh kind of launches the episode 7 Tea Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely some foreshadowing there, even if it's not
It's very small foreshadowing at best.
But I didn't feel cheated by it.
I didn't either.
I thought it was more of just a representation of the truth, honestly, rather than an actual physical book.
Honestly, I'm glad that 07 did not let us read it because, honestly, why would you by this point in the series?
It would defeat the purpose of what
It
he's
would
trying to
defeat the
teach you.
purpose of
Exactly.
the series. So I'm glad that we didn't get to read it. But yeah, like I never knew about the Book of the Single Truth, and then all of a sudden it was like, hey, there's a Book of the Single Truth. Why? Because fuck you, it exists.
Yeah, it did feel kind of out of place as soon as it was introduced. I'm like, when the hell did this get mentioned that Ava had a diary?
And then it became a central focus of the whole fucking chapter.
I just didn't feel that way, honestly. I just looked at it as more as like it's a type of holy grail. It doesn't technically necessarily have to exist, but it's what she's been searching for her whole life.
Which I feel...
It's just her end goal.
Which,
Yeah.
on one hand, I feel happy that she got, but on the other hand, her means to get it was just... It harkens back to Faust, in that... And actually, I guess we should talk about that a little bit right here. Like, Angie is pretty much a stand-in for, like, the work of Faust. Like, you make a deal with the devil, you get what you want, but it turns out to be bad.
I mean, that's kind of just a theme in literature, though.
Right. She got to see her
Yeah.
brother, but she got to tell him that she existed. She fucking died. She wanted to find out the truth of Rokenjima. Her parents murdered everyone. She wanted to see the truth. Yeah, no, that was pretty bad. She did not
I
like
think,
it.
as far as I'm concerned, all of the stories are like written down texts in the Umineko universe. And I think that the reason that we see a lot of these things in episode 8 is like almost a cautionary tale for Angie that the author of episode 8 is leaving behind. You know, regardless of whether or not those things exist, it's less about what they actually say and more about the problems of knowing what they contain.
Right, because sometimes knowing the truth is not going to lead you to a happy ending.
Yeah.
Right.
The way I was reading it into was, it's just denying everything else. That once she opens that book, everything else gets denied. That there is no happy possible ending if it's the worst case scenario. Which was my whole argument against not knowing the truth in this case.
Which is
That
why
once
I don't
you
want
open
to
it
watch
up, it's
Goldsmith's
revealed.
video.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't want to know the exact truth. I'd rather the best possible scenario than the worst.
Exactly.
Hey guys, Jacoby here. Thanks for listening to part 1 of this Let's Player discussion on Umineko no Nakukarani. The videos will be split between our channels, so check the description and the cards for the others in the series.